So we have some sound deadening material within this case, and it makes it much more bearable within your gaming setup. Okay, so I may have exaggerated that just a little bit. In this video, I'm going to take you through two topics that I want to cover. Number one, I bought this PC for about £270, maybe about $300, and I'm going to see if I can turn a profit on all the parts that I can sell off from this particular PC. The second thing that I want to cover in this video is what is the difference between old thermal paste and new thermal paste, and what kind of performance increase you can expect from your gaming PC. Now, bearing in mind this is only one sample size, and I will be coming out with a new video in the future where I'll be taking different PCs from different generations and seeing what the difference is with the before and after performance in terms of FPS and temperature. Now, this PC did end up costing me quite a bit more money, and when I looked at the ad, the main thing that stood out to me was 40 gigabytes of DDR4 RAM, which was very unusual for a particular PC build. And looking inside, it looks like we've got an AO cooler, an X99 motherboard, and we've got all the RAM slots in place there, except one of the RAM sticks was running in single channel, so I decided to remove that stick in order to improve stability. Now, I managed to turn the PC on and it worked first time, which was brilliant. I didn't need to do any tinkering or fixing anything in this PC, which is a really good result. Now, I wanted to do a benchmark test on this PC. The only thing I changed was removing that one RAM stick and also installed my own hard drives. I got 11,489 points on 3D Mark Firestrike, which is not entirely that impressive, and also I got fairly low scores on CPU as a benchmark. Now, moving into Metro Last Light, I got 77 degrees on the GPU and 52 degrees on the CPU, and obviously the GPU was being maxed out with only using around about 11%, 10% of the CPU. So there's a huge bottleneck difference here, and the GPU is definitely bottlenecking the CPU, and the CPU has a lot more to give. I was getting around about 115 to about 130 peak FPS in this game, so fairly reasonable FPS. It's still definitely playable, and this was running at the highest settings at 1080p. The other issue that I think may be slowing this down a little bit is the RAM is fairly slow. It's only running at 2133 MHz, which isn't the fastest RAM in the world, and actually upgrading to 32 MHz might make quite a bit of difference, but I'll have to see and wait on the next video to see if that's actually the case or not. Now moving on to Cyberpunk 2077, and again I was running this on ultra settings, although the graphics did look pretty bad when I was running it on the 1060. The 1060 is 6GB of GDDR5 RAM, and I just had to go back into the graphics settings just to double check exactly if it was actually running on ultra or not, and actually yes, in fact it was. So carrying on with this benchmark, I was getting around about 72 degrees, 99% utilization on the GPU, and 52 degrees on the CPU, with only using about 30%, and I was getting an unimpressive 37-38 FPS in Cyberpunk. So not all that great again in terms of the results, but I think here again we're seeing the GPU bottlenecking the CPU, and I think the CPU is capable of much more. Even on the driving sequences, things don't really change that much, so you know, it's still getting around about the same performance. And don't judge my driving, I know I'm really bad at driving with this particular vehicle. If you're better than me, then let me know, leave a comment down in the comment section. And please don't forget to like and subscribe if you like this kind of content. I've got more stuff coming later in this video that I think you'd really like. Now it was time to remove the GPU, and I removed it from the PC and just gave it a quick inspection just to see if there was any build-up of dust or anything on there, and to be honest it was pretty clean. There wasn't really that many issues that I could find with this particular GPU, but I still wanted to take it apart and have a look at the thermal paste. As you can see there, it looks like it's fairly dry. There's a minuscule amount on the actual heatsink and on the GPU die, so I think that really does need to be replaced, and it had gone pretty dry around the edges. I used my tried and tested MX4 Arctic thermal compound, and I'm probably going to run out of this thermal compound by the end of my next video. Just applied a small dot onto the die, and then I checked the VRMs just to make sure the thermal pads were still in good condition, and they were, so I just replaced the cover. Now, having a look at the CPU, you can see actually the thermal compound on here was pretty bad as well. It had been pitted and there wasn't a lot left on there, so I gave that a good clean off and applied a new application. So of course in this particular instance I used the right amount of thermal paste. Because this is a larger CPU, I needed to add extra thermal paste on that die, so I added 5 dots. Don't know if that's accurate or correct or not, you may correct me in the comment section. But in actual fact, when I went and booted the PC back up, I got 11,476, and in the last video it was 478, so I'm actually lost a little bit of performance on 3D Mark. I don't know if that's because the thermal paste was still new and fresh. On user benchmark I got slightly better performance, but marginal, it wouldn't be noticeable. So I went and fired up Fortnite again, and although initially it looks like the FPS is worse with the new thermal paste, it works out to be about the same. It's only because I've got different sequences happening within the two different videos. In terms of temperature, they're slightly better, but not by much, only a couple of degrees, and also the utilization is around about the same, so not a huge amount of difference here. And actually this surprised me quite a bit in terms of its performance, and I think that's partly due because this PC is a performance gaming PC, and of course I think the builder probably used some good quality thermal compound. Whereas if you're using like a pre-build or maybe a budget build PC from another vendor, then they may use lesser quality thermal compound, so you may see a bigger difference in terms of your performance. But in this particular instance, there wasn't a huge amount of difference between the old thermal compound and the new thermal paste. So bearing that in mind, maybe I will do some additional videos to have a look to see if there is any difference between, say, pre-builds or budget build PCs, and I'll be doing a bulk buy, maybe 5 or 6 PCs, to compare the difference between all of them, and I'll report my findings to you. Now having a look at Metro, and in this test I got slightly better temperatures again on the GPU, using 99% utilization, and again you could probably argue I'm getting some better FPS performance out of this. Again, there are two different sequences that I've got in this particular video, which isn't exactly representative, but moving forwards I will get better at making sure that I'm using the exact same sequences within the two games. But this kind of gives you a ballpark figure of what to expect between the old thermal paste and the new thermal paste in this particular instance. So again, the CPU was running slightly hotter as well, and with only around about 10, maybe 12% utilization in this particular instance. So I think it would really help out if there was a much more powerful GPU within this PC and using much more of that CPU in this particular test. So I'm going to leave you with some of this video footage so you can draw some of your own conclusions based on the results that I've gathered. Now moving on to the final test, Cyberpunk 2077, and here I've done a much better job of making sure that I captured the same footage, although during the first capture I went into the menu and check the graphic settings, which isn't great, but it should give you a better representation in terms of the difference of performance between the old and new. So in this particular instance, you know, I was getting around about the same 99% utilization on the GPU, and I was getting 1 degree less on that GPU and about the same temperature on the CPU with the same amount of utilization thereabouts. However, I was getting maybe a FPS more, maybe it might have actually been slightly worse, but to be honest, the difference is barely noticeable between the old and the new thermal paste. So again, a result that I didn't really expect. I thought there would be some kind of improvement that I would expect to see, and I draw that down to perhaps in the first instance when this PC was first being built, the original builder actually used fairly good thermal compound. I don't know what brand they used, and this was applied in 2016, so you could probably argue that thermal compound probably lasts for about 8 years and it will still perform really well. Although what I would say, for the price of buying some thermal paste and applying it to your GPU and CPU, is probably still worth doing, because it only costs around about $9 to $12, and it's fairly quick to apply fresh thermal paste to your PC, and it probably gives you a better stability as well while running the games. So Moving on to the actual disassembly of the PC, and I'll be showing you whether I actually made a profit or a loss on buying this particular computer. Now, I started off removing the hard drive, and it was a nice surprise, a 2TB Seagate drive in there, so fairly happy with that drive being made available. And I've got a 140mm Corsair single rad AIO cooler, which again is a nice addition to this particular PC. So looking at the case I've got here, you can see I've got a hot swappable bay for the hard drives, and you can just simply slot the hard drive in the front of the PC, which I thought was pretty cool. I haven't seen that as part of a standard PC case, and I thought I'd give that a try because I'd never seen that before. So I slid my hard drive into the particular slot, and again it just connected straight away. So I think that was quite a nice feature for Coolmaster to include with their PC case, although this case was fairly heavy even with all the components stripped out. Now, taking out the GPU, and again I think we already looked at this GPU, but it's a 6GB DDR5 GTX 1060, which again fetches for about $120. Now, looking at the RAM, I've got 3 sticks of 8GB Crucial RAM, all at 2133 MHz, and also SK Hynix at the same specification. Looking at the motherboard, I've got an Asrock X99 motherboard in this PC, and I'm really impressed with this motherboard. It's an X99 Extreme 4 edition, and I'm really happy that it's actually working because these motherboards tend to break quite a lot. Looking at the back, of course the cable management is a little bit of a mess, but it's not too bad. At least the front is all clear and nicely laid out. And I found this particular connector on the back. It was actually a SATA connector that would be able to hot swap some of your drives inside the case as well. So again, I think that's quite a nice feature. A little surprise that I found was an SSD drive. It was a Samsung Evo 850, and it was about 250 gigabytes in terms of storage. So again, really happy with that, but I have to test to see if this drive actually works or not. Next thing up front was I just wanted to have a look at this AIO cooler because it was a bit of a gangster lean inside this PC. I just wanted to see what was going on with this fitment. I didn't really understand why it was on the front. Normally it's towards the back or the top, and you're drawing hot air into the case, so that didn't make sense to me, and I realized there was a metal bracket that was in the way causing it to lean. I just had to have a look at that other slot again because I couldn't believe my eyes that there's actually a hot swappable drive as part of the standard case. And just looking at the case, I could probably get around about $45 to $50 for it. The AIO cooler, they don't tend to do quite well, so maybe $30. The CPU is a Xeon E5-2696 version 3, running at 2.3 GHz. Has a massive 18 cores, 36 threads, which is actually a mammoth CPU, and it also boosts over to 3.6 GHz, so a really impressive CPU here, and that will fetch around about $180. Now, the motherboard is in really good condition, so again I think I should be able to get about $150 for the motherboard. And then the hard drive, maybe $20 if I'm lucky, and the RAM sticks I should be able to get around about $60 to $70 for all those sticks being sold as a 40 gig pair. The Evo 850 again is around about $40. The GTX 1060 I should be looking around about $120 to $130. And then the PSU, those aren't doing very well at the moment, so again I think maybe around about $20 to $30. Thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.